All right, so this lesson is number 15, even and odd functions. And a lot of you guys have been asking me, is this lesson easy? Is this lesson hard? Well, the truth is I don't really think it's that hard. It's just more conceptual learning, which means building on the foundation which we laid, but not a lot of doing work, not a lot of algebra. Just learning new facts to add to our fact bank that we've been creating about trig. So the new facts we're going to learn are about domain and range of sine and cosine, and then even and odd functions. I know you guys really didn't like domain and range last year, a lot of you. But let's recap. The domain is the set of all x values. And hopefully you remember that the range is the set of all y values. So what are all of the x values and y values that are used by sine and cosine when we graph them? Now, we haven't graphed sine and cosine yet, but we can still talk about the domain and range based on what we learned yesterday. So what we learned yesterday, and whenever you open your foldable, you're going to have to scratch out domain and range, write it up here, and we're actually going to start on this side with the circle. So what we learned yesterday was about the unit circle. And the unit circle is just a circle on the coordinate grid whose radius is 1 unit long. So I'm going to put a 1, 0 here so that we can realize that this is a unit circle. Now, let's talk about all the y values and all the x values. So first, the domain. If we look here, there are no x values being used before -1. This graph doesn't have any points over here on the left. So for the domain, only points from -1 all the way up to +1 are being used. Nothing else is being used. But notice every x value, I can't really tell if you guys can see that, every x value in between is being used. In fact, every x value in between -1 and 1 is being used twice. Okay, so what we can say then over here is that x is greater than or equal to -1, looks like that, but less than or equal to 1. This is basically like saying x is between -1 and 1. And that's what we see in the graph. Now let's look at the range. So if we want to talk about the range, we're looking at the y-axis and we're going from bottom to top. So what's the lowest y value being used? It's -1, because this is 1 unit long. Nothing else down here is being used. But then notice all the y values are being used twice. Over here and over here. So like, for example, 1/2. The y value 1/2 is being used over here and over here. That's what I mean by it's being used twice. And that pattern continues all the way up. Every single little point you could create on the y-axis is being used twice. But then once you hit +1, no more y values get used at all. So we could say y is between -1 and +1. So if we go over here and talk about our range, it's y is greater than or equal to -1, but less than or equal to +1. The reason why we went through all of this is because we discovered something very important yesterday. In the unit circle, sine of your angle always equals y, because your r is 1 and y over 1 is just y. And then your cosine of t always equals x, because x over r is 1, so cosine of t always just equals x. So what we can find here is that since y is equal to sine of t and x is equal to cosine of t, we can actually substitute over here. So we can write a new statement. we can say the cosine of t, cosine of t is always going to fall between -1 and 1 in the unit circle. And if you think about it, all the things we used yesterday were fractions, and they were either positive or negative, but they were no bigger than 1. Every single fraction we used yesterday. And then over here, we can replace y with sine of t. And so we can write this in a new way. So now we know that sine of t is always going to be between -1 and 1. That's important because basically it tells us that no matter what angle we put in for t, we're always going to get a value in between -1 and 1. So that is our domain and range for sine and cosine. And if you think you'll come back to your notes and not know what's going on, I'm going to do some highlighting here. Highlight my sines, highlight my cosines, highlight my x's, and highlight my y's. So you can see blue is equal to green, so blue can be substituted with green. Pink is equal to orange, so pinks can be substituted with orange. And that's where we get these statements. And really, we just want to use these facts. Just store those away in a memory bank, and we'll come back to those in a few lessons. In the next video, we're going to talk about even and odd functions.